The Galactic Academy's amphitheater fell silent as Thomas activated the plasma whip. The weapon hummed to life, its superheated filament glowing an angry crimson that cast dancing shadows across the tiered seats. 200 cadets from 40 different species watched with a mixture of awe and terror as the human male stood at the center of the training arena, the whip crackling with barely contained energy. "This," Professor Velkoth announced, his chitinous mandibles clicking with satisfaction, "is a Class 7 plasma weapon. The filament burns at approximately 15,000 degrees. Contact with organic matter results in instantaneous cauterization and, typically, death." The Craxian instructor gestured toward Thomas with one of his forearms. "Cadet Thomas has volunteered to demonstrate proper handling techniques for extreme hazard weaponry." Thomas gave the whip an experimental flick. The plasma cord sang through the air, leaving a glowing afterimage. Several students in the front row flinched backward. The weapon was designed for the thermal species, whose thick silicon-based hides could withstand brief contact with the superheated material. For most carbon-based life forms, it was considered a suicide weapon to wield without full environmental armor. Yet Thomas wore only the standard academy training uniform. Karen sat in the third row, her arms crossed, watching with an expression that other species had learned to recognize as distinctly human. Amused skepticism. Her roommate, a crystalline Curix named Shimmer, vibrated nervously beside her. "Your species mate is going to harm himself," Shimmer chimed, her translucent body pulsing with anxious colors. "Why do humans always volunteer for the demonstrations involving fire or explosions?" "Because we're idiots," Karen replied flatly, though her eyes never left Thomas. "Confident idiots." Professor Velkoth continued his lecture, using Thomas as a living mannequin to illustrate proper stance, grip, and strike angles. The human moved with practiced ease, the deadly weapon spinning and cracking at his command. It was impressive, Karen had to admit. Thomas had always been one of the top students in weapons training. Then came the challenge. Zraxthor, a Vexnari warrior from one of the Empire's most prestigious military castes, rose from his seat. The reptilian alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scales gleaming like polished obsidian. "With respect, Professor," his voice rumbled like grinding stones, "I question the wisdom of allowing a human to demonstrate such a weapon. Their species lacks the natural armor of true warriors. Perhaps one of the Vexnari should shut up and let the instructor teach," Karen called out. The amphitheater erupted in a cacophony of gasps, clicks, and whistles, the universal sound of students anticipating drama. Professor Velkoth's compound eyes swiveled toward Karen, but before he could speak, Zraxthor descended the steps toward the arena floor. "The human female wishes to defend her mate's honor?" Zraxthor's mouth split into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of serrated teeth. How primitive, how expected. "He's not my mate." "You overgrown gecko." Karen stood, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent hall. "But since you're so concerned about who should handle dangerous weapons, how about this? You crack that whip at me and we'll see what happens." The professor's mandibles clacked in alarm. "Cadet Karen, that is absolutely I volunteer for the demonstration, sir." Karen was already moving down the steps. "Isn't that what the Academy teaches? Practical experience under controlled conditions?" Thomas deactivated the plasma whip, his expression somewhere between horrified and impressed. "Karen, what are you doing?" "Probably something stupid," she admitted, stepping into the arena. "Activate it." "No way, this thing will—" "Thomas." Karen's voice went quiet but firm. "Activate the whip. Trust me." Their eyes met. In that moment, something passed between them, some understanding born of the 2 years they'd spent as the only humans in their cohort, constantly having to prove that their species belonged among the stars' warrior races. Thomas activated the plasma whip. Zrax Thor descended into the arena, accepting the weapon with obvious satisfaction. "I will aim for the arm," he announced. "The medical bay can regenerate lost limbs. Eventually." Karen simply stood there, loose and ready, her right arm extended slightly. "Whenever you're ready, Sparkles." The Vexnari warrior didn't hesitate. The plasma whip sang through the air with a crack like thunder, the superheated filament moving faster than most species could track. It wrapped around Karen's exposed forearm with a sound like sizzling meat. Shimmer shrieked. Half the class looked away. Karen didn't even flinch. Instead, she grabbed the plasma filament with her other hand. The amphitheater filled with the smell of burning hair and flesh, but Karen's expression remained calm, almost bored. Before anyone could process what was happening, she yanked hard. The plasma whip's filament stretched, the energized matter responding to forces it wasn't designed to withstand. Karen twisted her arm, wrapping the cord around her forearm like rope, her muscles standing out in stark relief. Then, with a sharp, decisive motion, she snapped her arm downward. The plasma filament shattered. The weapon died with a pathetic sputter, fragments of superheated matter dissipating into the air like dying stars. Karen unwrapped the now inert cord from her arm and let it fall to the arena floor. Her forearm was red and blistered, already beginning to swell but structurally intact. The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. "You see," Karen said conversationally, examining her burned arm with clinical detachment, "the thing about plasma weapons is that they rely on consistent energy distribution along the filament. Disrupt that distribution with sufficient force and variable tension points, and the magnetic containment fails." She looked up at Zrax Thor, who stood frozen in shock. "Also, human pain tolerance is pretty high when we're angry, and you made me angry." Professor Velkoth's translator struggled to process the series of clicks and whistles that emerged from his mandibles. Finally, he managed, "Medical bay. Now, both of you." As Karen walked past Thomas, she muttered, "Still think volunteering for the dangerous demonstrations is a good idea?" Thomas stared at her burned arm, then at the broken weapon, then back at her face. "You're absolutely insane." "Yeah," Karen agreed. "But I'm human. It's kind of our thing." The story spread through the academy within hours. By the next day, enrollment in human physiology and psychology courses had tripled. Zrax Thor requested a transfer to a different combat training cohort, and the weapons instructors began adding significant safety disclaimers to any demonstration involving humans. Karen's arm healed in 3 weeks. She kept the scar.